Princess Diana's surgeon breaks his silence after decades. The truth is shocking. Princess Diana's tragic death has always been shrouded in speculation. But now, decades later, the surgeon who tried to save her life is finally breaking his silence. What really happened that night in Paris? For years, the world has been left with more questions than answers. But this surgeon's firsthand account could change everything we thought we knew. He's been silent until now. Why? What was so shocking that he kept it hidden for so long? In this video, we're uncovering the facts and untangle the mystery. You're about to hear details that have never been shared with the public before. If you thought you knew the full story of Princess Diana's final moments, prepare to be stunned. Let's dive right in. Number 1. The fateful night begins. It was the early hours of August 31, 1997, when Dr. Monsef Dahman, a young surgeon at the time, found himself thrust into a moment that would forever alter the course of history. On call at Pitié-Salpêtrière Hospital in Paris, Dr. Dahman could never have anticipated the patient would soon arrive in critical condition. Around 2 a.m., emergency services rushed Princess Diana through the hospital doors. She'd been involved in a catastrophic car crash in the Pont d'Alma tunnel, an incident that was already making headlines worldwide. As a doctor, your duty is to save lives. And the weight of this responsibility was compounded by the knowledge of who was lying on the stretcher before him. It was Princess Diana, the beloved people's princess. In that moment, all the media frenzy, the flashing lights, and public fascination fell away. There was only a severely injured woman who needed immediate care. Dr. Dahman knew it was going to be a long, uphill battle, but nothing could have prepared him for what would unfold over the next few hours. Number 2. Assessing the damage. When Princess Diana was brought into the hospital, the team worked quickly to assess the extent of her injuries. X-rays and scans revealed this stark reality. She had sustained severe internal bleeding. Among the most significant of her injuries was a tear in her left pulmonary vein, a rare and catastrophic condition. This type of injury is nearly impossible to treat and often fatal because the pulmonary vein is responsible for carrying oxygenated blood from the lungs to the heart. Any damage to it can lead to rapid blood loss and organ failure. Dr. Dahman and the team knew the situation was grim, but they were determined to fight. They couldn't afford to be swayed by the emotions surrounding Princess Diana's status as a global icon. They had to remain focused, methodical, and quick. Despite the overwhelming odds stacked against them, the medical team prepared to do everything they could to save her life. Number 3. Emergency procedure initiated. Recognizing the gravity of Princess Diana's injuries, Dr. Dahman made the swift decision to perform a thoracotomy, a life-saving procedure where the chest cavities open to access the heart and lungs. In this case, they needed to stop the internal bleeding and attempt to repair the damaged pulmonary vein. Opening up her chest was a last resort, something doctors do only in the most desperate situations. But time was running out, and the situation was dire. With the clock ticking and Princess Diana's condition rapidly deteriorating, Dr. Dahman and the team knew they had to act fast. The surgical theater became a battlefield, every second a crucial step in either saving or losing Princess Diana's life. This wasn't just an ordinary case. It was an extraordinary fight against odds so great that failure seemed almost inevitable. Yet no one in that room was ready to give up. Not just yet. Number 4. Unexpected complication. As the surgery progressed, the team encountered a complication that made the situation even more precarious. They discovered a tear in Princess Diana's pericardium, the protective sac around the heart. This discovery meant her injuries were even more severe than initially anticipated. It wasn't just the pulmonary vein that had been damaged. The trauma from the crash had caused significant injury to the heart itself. For Dr. Dahman and his team, this was a devastating blow. Repairing a torn pericardium is an extremely delicate procedure, and with Princess Diana already suffering from massive blood loss, the odds of her survival were shrinking by the minute. Despite the emotional weight of the situation, the team worked tirelessly, refusing to let the gravity of the moment overwhelm them. They were treating one of the most famous women in the world, but at that moment, she was simply their patient, and they owed it to her to keep fighting. Number 5. Calling for backup. Realizing the complexity of the situation, Dr. Dahman made the call for backup. Around 2:30 a.m., Professor Elaine Pavy, one of France's top cardiothoracic surgeons, was summoned to assist in the case. Professor Pavy's arrival brought a sense of renewed hope, as he was highly regarded for his skill in dealing with complex heart surgeries. The entire team knew they were facing nearly insurmountable odds, but Professor Pavy's expertise provided a glimmer of possibility. They were dealing with one of the most challenging cases of their careers, and the addition of a surgeon of Pavy's caliber was critical. Together, they would work through the night in a frantic attempt to save Princess Diana's life. But even with the best hands in the room, the situation was growing more dire by the second. The odds were heavily stacked against them, but they refused to back down. Number 6. Race against time. With Professor Pavy now in the operating room, the team worked with even more urgency. Princess Diana's torn pulmonary vein was the critical injury they needed to repair. Every second of delay increased the risk of irreversible damage. The team's mission was clear: stop the bleeding and stabilize her condition before it was too late. But as they worked, they were met with one complication after another. Despite their best efforts, Princess Diana's condition continued to deteriorate. Her blood pressure was dropping, and her heart was struggling to keep going. For the team of surgeons, this was a race against time, a high-stakes battle where the difference between life and death could come down to mere seconds. They knew the odds were against them, but they pressed on, driven by the determination to save a life that meant so much to so many. Number 7. Cardiac arrest. Despite the tireless efforts of the surgical team, the situation took a heartbreaking turn. Princess Diana's heart suddenly stopped. The likely cause? Massive blood loss from the torn pulmonary vein. Her body simply couldn't keep up with the trauma it had endured. For the medical team, the realization was devastating, but they weren't ready to give up. They immediately initiated resuscitation efforts, knowing full well that time was running out. Cardiac arrest is a life-threatening event under any circumstances, but with the extent of Princess Diana's injuries, the chances of bringing her back were slim. Still, the team was determined to do everything in their power to save her. The air in the operating room was thick with tension as the team worked frantically to revive her heart. For them, this wasn't just about saving a patient. It was about saving a symbol of hope and compassion for millions around the world. Number 8. Desperate revival attempts. Once Princess Diana's heart stopped, the team began an all-out effort to restart it. They used manual cardiac massage, defibrillation, and a range of medications in an attempt to get her heart beating again. Each attempt was met with growing frustration as Princess Diana remained unresponsive. The team knew they were running out of options, but they couldn't bring themselves to stop. They knew what her loss would mean, not just to her family, but to millions around the world. The surgeons, nurses, and technicians in that room were battling for more than just a life. They were fighting for a global icon. Every jolt of the defibrillator, every dose of medication, and every squeeze of her heart carried the weight of a world that was already beginning to mourn. Despite their best efforts, the situation grew increasingly bleak as the minutes ticked by. Number 9. Hour-long battle. For an excruciating hour, Dr. Dahman, Professor Pavy, and their team fought relentlessly to revive Princess Diana. They tried every method available, from manual cardiac massage to high doses of adrenaline. The longer they worked, the more desperate the situation became. Despite their tireless efforts, there were no signs of improvement. With each passing minute, the reality of the situation became more difficult to ignore. But they continued, refusing to give up hope. After all, this wasn't just any patient. They were fighting for Princess Diana, a woman who had touched the lives of so many. The battle in that operating room was not just against time, but against the devastating reality that sometimes, no matter how hard you fight, the damage is too great to overcome. The emotional toll on the team was immense. but they pressed on, driven by their duty and the hope that somehow they could bring her back. Number 10. The difficult decision. As the clock approached 4 a.m., it became clear that their efforts were in vain. After nearly an hour of intense resuscitation attempts, there was still no sign of revival. The medical team was faced with the heartbreaking decision to cease their efforts. It's the hardest choice any doctor has to make, and in this case, the emotional weight was unbearable. They had given everything they had, but sometimes even the best doctors and surgeons in the world can't overcome the severity of the injuries. Dr. Dahman and Professor Pavi shared a solemn look before they made the final call. At 4 a.m., they pronounced Princess Diana dead. It was a moment of profound sadness, not just for the team who had fought so hard to save her, but for the world that would soon learn of the loss of one of its most beloved figures. Number 11. Pronouncement of death. When the decision was made to stop resuscitation, the room fell silent. The reality of the situation hit everyone at once. Princess Diana, a woman who had been larger than life, was gone. Dr. Dahman and his team were left to grapple with the weight of what had just transpired. They had done everything they could, but it wasn't enough. The news of Princess Diana's death would soon spread across the world, leaving millions in shock and grief. For the doctors in that room, the moment was deeply personal. They'd fought not just for a patient, but for someone who had been a symbol of hope and compassion for so many. The weight of that loss was immeasurable. As they stepped out of the operating room, they knew the world would never be the same. Number 12. Emotional toll on medical staff. The emotional toll on Dr. Dahman and his colleagues was immense. They had just spent hours fighting to save one of the most famous women in the world. And despite their best efforts, they couldn't prevent the inevitable. The weight of their failure was heavy, but they also knew that they had done everything within their power to save her. For Dr. Dahman, this wasn't just another night on call. This was a night that would follow him for the rest of his life. The impact of Princess Diana's death was felt around the world, but for those in the operating room that night, the loss was deeply personal. They'd been there in her final moments, battling against impossible odds, and the grief they felt was compounded by the knowledge that the world would soon be mourning alongside them. Number 13. Global implications. Dr. Monsef Dahman had spoken about the overwhelming sense of responsibility he felt that night. The team knew they weren't just fighting to save a life. They were fighting to save a global icon. The emotional burden was immense, not just because of Princess Diana's status, but because of what she represented to the world. She was a symbol of compassion, of grace, and of change. Her loss was not just a personal tragedy for her family, it was a global loss. In those final moments, Dr. Dahman and his team understood the magnitude of what was happening. They were part of a story that would be told for decades to come, and the weight of that responsibility was not lost on them. In the years since, Dr. Dahman has reflected on that night and the impact it had on him, both as a doctor and as a person. Number 14. Decades of silence. For over 2 decades, Dr. Monsef Dahman remained silent about what had transpired that night. The trauma of the event, combined with the immense public interest in Princess Diana's death, made it difficult for him to speak out. He carried the weight of that night with him, but he refrained from discussing it publicly. It wasn't until recently that he decided to share his account of the events, providing new insights into the desperate attempts to save Princess Diana's life. For Dr. Dahman, this wasn't just about setting the record straight. It was about sharing his truth. The silence had been difficult, but breaking it came with its own set of challenges. His decision to finally speak out had provided the world with a clear understanding of what happened in those critical moments. But it also reopened old wounds for those who were there that night. Number 15. Breaking his silence. In a recent interview, Dr. Dahman finally opened up about the events of that fateful night. His decision to speak out has shed new light on the efforts made to save Princess Diana's life. For many, his account provides a deeper understanding of the complexity of her injuries and the immense challenges the medical team faced. Dr. Dahman's story is one of dedication, of relentless effort in the face of impossible odds. His account has given the world a glimpse into the human side of a tragedy that has often been overshadowed by conspiracy theories and media speculation. By breaking his silence, Dr. Dahman has allowed us to see the true scope of what happened that night. And in doing so, he's given the world a fuller picture of the final hours of Princess Diana's life. And there you have it, the incredible, heartbreaking story from the surgeon who was there on that fateful night, breaking his silence after decades. The truth behind what happened to Princess Diana is both shocking and devastating. But now, we want to hear from you. What do you think about Dr. Dahman's account? Does his story change how you see the events of that tragic night? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear them. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it with others, and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. And make sure to hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any updates. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye!